culture starts from the top. And if you're the CEO, your tone is going to set the culture for the business. How you treat people, how you speak to people, all those things spring from the top. You can't avoid that. Because if I look to the one thing, if you said, okay, what's the one thing that's helped us get to where we are? It is our culture. The more we grow the ocean, the more shoreline we create, the more ports of call we create, the more opportunities there are.
So Dave, thanks for making the time out of your busy schedule to join us on our Escape the CEO Zoom Loop podcast. This podcast is something that Glenn and I created about a year ago, and it came out of our work that we did about 4 years ago around a piece of research that we did and ended up entitling it the CEO Playbook. And, what we found in that were these themes that CEOs were dealing with as they ran companies, good and bad, and challenges that they ran into and things that they had to navigate around. And so we decided after doing that research and developing the CEO Playbook and not really knowing what that research was going to say, that we would actually start a seminar series of it. And so Dave has been a part of a couple of our seminar series, Glenn, the ones that we ran in Detroit.
Yeah. Oh, that's
over
right.
the last
Great.
over the last year and a half. So it's great to have Dave participate. So we're excited to have you here today to talk about your journey as a CEO and your journey of working with CEOs. So thank you and welcome. If you give us a little bit of an overview of kind of Wilshire.
Thanks, John. Honored to be here and have the conversation. So Wilshire has been around probably since the mid 80s. It was originally created by the Managing Partners Association of Northwestern Mutual to have an employee benefit operation in every major market across the country where they had Northwestern Mutual wealth management advisors and financial reps working with business owners, who then oftentimes would say, hey, you're helping me with my personal insurance and wealth management needs. Can you help me with my company? And so my organization started, I think, in 1986. I took it over to run it in 2010. At the time, I was the managing partner in Northwestern Mutual, hired me to come in and run it. That was my doom loop, by the way. We can come back to that.
All right, good.
But I got a chance to run it for a few years. And then through just a turn of events, had a chance to buy it from him in 2014. At that time, we had maybe 4 or 5 employees and had just kind of come out of the depths of turnaround. And today we've got about 35 people on our team. We're clearly one of the larger privately held employee benefit consulting firms in Michigan now. Through a lot of M&A activity, our competitors have really aggregated down. I think we're just a really high service, high quality employee benefit consulting firm. Most people hear what we do and think, okay, you're a benefit agency, and we are. And obviously we help companies figure out product and price and plan design and all those things. But being a broker today is much more about, technology and compliance and regulatory stuff as it is knowing insurance. So it really does kind of put us, I think, at the center of our clients' lives a lot. We're usually the second largest line item on most budgets when you think about companies' operating expenses, and it's wages and then benefits. I really prefer dealing with closely held businesses that are still privately held and working with entrepreneurs to help them, create good cultures and create good benefit packages and things like that. So a lot of directions we can go, but that's a high level overview.
Awesome. All right. So John talked about the CEO Playbook, which came out of a research study we did interviewing 72 different CEOs. And in the analysis, we came out something that we coined the CEO Doom Loop. And really what the Doom Loop it entails is really a CEO of an organization kind of getting it over their head, ultimately. And many times when that happens with the CEO, they tend to lean back into the business. And many times that might be like, meddling in other people's jobs or I'm going to dig in deeper into the business. And ultimately when they do that, they kind of start relinquishing their leadership role as a CEO. And then the business doesn't do well. And then they get even more stressed out, and then they get back into the business even more. And it's this kind of doom loop that perpetuates itself. Yeah. Dave, it sounds like maybe you might have been there once or twice in your career. So you want to tell us?
It's funny because I've thought about this quite a bit, and maybe there's 2. I think before I even bought the company, I walked into one. The company was really in bad shape. It had been mismanaged for several years. I had a headhunter, you might know, Todd Oha, was in the market, was working for the Northwestern Mutual leadership team in Michigan at the time, and introduced me to the opportunity. I said no twice. It took kind of 6 months for me to agree to give it a shot. So I knew it was a lot of work, but I got into the job, and I don't think even, my managing partner who owned it at the time knew how bad things were.
Oh,
Just, losing money, obviously, but very poor morale, very poor operations, clients leaving almost every week. And I got about 6 months in, I'm like, wow, did I make a mistake? And is this even fixable? We went through some litigation with a former employee that was stealing clients. It was a lot of heartache and headache. But I did just kind of pull my bootstraps up and just one small positive action at a time over the course of a year or two, finally got it to the point where we weren't bleeding anymore. We were starting to, establish kind of a good culture and a good cadence at work and regaining a reputation of being able to do decent work. And it took probably 2 full years to turn it around and stabilize things.
wow.
And then fortunately, about a year later, I had a chance to buy it. So I knew what I was getting, when I bought it.
Oh, quite a story.
Yeah. So when you got into it for the first time, did you have any equity or just have a job?
No, I had a job. I had a Phantom equity program.
Okay.
That basically, that's the reason I took the job. It was just, for every dollar we grew it, I had a percentage of that, kind of earned equity over time. There was never really even an opportunity when I first started, kind of the way the buy sells were written in the agreement with Northwestern Mutual was I was never going to be able to own actual stock. And then that changed a couple of years later. But at the time I was, effectively running it. And the guy that owned it, I joke, he had to buy the benefit agency as a part of the financial group when he came in and took over the Detroit market, but he probably still couldn't spell Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan at the time. So, it wasn't a great equation to own an employee benefit operation and not really understand how it works. And I say that tongue in cheek and
Yeah.
respectfully.
Yeah.
He would laugh if I said that.
So I have a question for you, follow up to that. So in your experience as a CEO, do you find that you've been in the doom loop differently as a CEO, as an employee of a company versus the CEO with equity and ownership of a company? Is it different?
Yeah. So in 2014, when I bought Wilshire, healthcare reform had just taken off in 2010-ish,
Yeah.
2011. And I can't remember the magazine, but it was like a Forbes or a Fortune magazine did a survey of CEOs back in 2013, 14 that said basically, hey, in 5 years, is your company going to be offering employee health insurance? And like 2/3 of them said, no, Obamacare, healthcare reform is going to take care of that. We're going to be out of the business. And in that moment, we were barely making money and I had to take out a very substantial SBA loan. I pulled all the equity out of my house. I pulled all my free cash out of my bank accounts.
Yeah.
And pushed all the chips in the middle to buy this thing. And, my family's like going, are you sure? Like, you should be doing that? And it was scary, but
Yeah.
at the time I just believed that this country is always going to compete for talent with something more than a paycheck. I really had a hard time, and I'm not, back then I wouldn't say I was a, mastermind in the American medical insurance world, but I really had a hard time believing we were going to end up with the Canadian model or eliminating employer-sponsored healthcare altogether. And ultimately I said, okay, this might be a big risk, and the employee medical insurance market might go away, but employers are always going to compete for talent with things like additional insurance products and, retirement plans and other things besides the paycheck. So that gave me the confidence to move forward with it. And I think that first year or two was a little scary, but it was exhilarating. We were really starting to grow and feel good. I did do an acquisition in 2016 and another one in 2019, and both of them created somewhat much more minor doom loops because it was blending cultures and very different processes and philosophies and people, created a lot of stress on my staff. I risked losing 1 or 2 really good people to the process and was able to navigate through that effectively. But, I learned a whole lot in doing those acquisitions. And today, the multiple has gotten pretty high in our business. There's a lot of private equity money floating around. There's a lot of M&A activity happening. I don't really want to grow by acquisition anymore. I think we're just doing way better growing organically, welcoming companies into our model that fit our model, that appreciate our service and, service model and value proposition, and not having the noise of trying to push those cultures together.
That's an interesting point, Dave. We'd run into a lot of business owners, CEOs, and certainly, PE firms who would say, that's the only way to grow is through acquisition. So I'd be curious to dig down deeper on that, your take there.
I think some of it, I had a fortunate opportunity when I first got in the employee benefit business back in the late 90s. I went to work for a PEO that had just recently gone public and raised a bunch of cash. And we went out in my first year and a half of the company, we did 4 acquisitions. And I got a chance to see like, what's the value and power in that and the good and the bad,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, obviously M&A activity has been a part of the American business world for as long as it's been in existence. And there's a lot of good M&A, mergers and acquisitions and aggregation going on. But for me, it's kind of like, what are your motivations? Since I bought the company, we've had 18% compound annual growth, year over year. Some years better than others. And I don't need to do an acquisition to grow.
Mhm.
And I don't want to grow for the sake of growing. I'm not trying to build up something that's got a lot of paper value and parachute out of time. I think we're really focused
Yep.
on quality and delivering on service and being a great organization. I'm blessed to have now all three of my sons in the business with me, which is a lot of fun. And we can certainly talk about that. One of the positive things that came out of the first acquisition I did after I bought my business is that I hired a company called CultureWise, or David Friedman, High Performing Cultures, if you've heard of him,
Mhm.
to help create a culture philosophy and a set of norms and behaviors for our company that help pull people together and give us common language and maybe things that we could reference. And there's 30 fundamental principles that we developed back, and that was 2016. So 11 years ago now, 10 years. At first it seemed cheesy and
Mhm.
it seemed a little bit manufactured. It's become kind of our fabric,
Wow.
and it's become a great way for us to communicate, to treat each other. I think we draw a lot of recruits and people to our business because of our culture now. It's been kind of fun to see that unfold.
That's a refreshing viewpoint, Dave. John, probably you see the same thing where we'll come in and be working with companies, and many times CEOs are, well, let's get to the action. Let's get to getting stuff done, and let's enough of the fuzzy and the soft stuff, which is the culture and the purpose, which I agree with you. I think that's the foundation. That's what holds a company together over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've all heard this, but culture starts from the top. And if you're the CEO, your tone is going to set the culture for the business, how you treat people, how you speak to people, what you expect out of them, all those things spring from the top. You can't avoid that. You can't delegate that. And so I had to face that. I was never one to say, well, I'm not big on mission statements and vision statements. Those things tend to get scripted, put on a plaque on the wall, and we don't really live it.
Yeah.
And that's where
Yeah.
our Wilshire way, our fundamentals are our behaviors. So it's modeling and talking about behaviors. When good things happen, we reference one of the Wilshire way tenets to show that as an example of what we mean by that. When there's difficult conversations that need to be had, it allows us to speak and bring things up that might be difficult to hear, but we know we're all doing it in the spirit of good intent, and we're speaking straight because we want to improve something. We're not trying to attack somebody. So that's worked out really well.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I love all that. And, I think that what's essential for CEOs that are listening to this is exactly what you said, is they are the culture, right? They're the ones that are the creator of the culture and create the mechanisms to hold the organization accountable to consistent behaviors. And if they're not doing that, it's not something outsourced to HR. And I think that a lot of CEOs think that's an HR function. It's really not.
Yep.
This is how we operate. This is how we show up as an organization. And again, Dave, listen, Glenn does too. I love using football analogies. The head football coach is the one that sets the culture for how that team's going to perform. He doesn't delegate that to his offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, to the players. It comes from the coach as a mindset around what we're going to look like and how we're going to operate and how we're going to take the field and how we behave, all those things. It's just crazy how many businesses you go into and the CEO's not operating that way. They're operating as in a function, right? They're operating as a finance person, a salesperson, or an estimator in construction, whatever, but they're not really operating as a CEO. And that's really essential to that mindset you talked about. So I love that. So let me ask you another question, Dave. So you work with CEOs of small to some large organizations, but I think I heard you say you like kind of closely held organizations, family organizations, which is a spot where I spent a lot of time, and I know Glenn does too. How does your role put you in the center of those organizations and their biggest challenges? What do you see?
Most of our clients today, most of our revenue comes from businesses that have maybe, 40 or 50 employees up to a couple of thousand employees. We have a lot of business in that kind of 50 to 1,000 employee space. And obviously in the context of helping them with benefits, employee benefits is like wrestling an 800-pound gorilla compared to most other types of insurance, right? It's very active. It renews every year. We're a highly inflationary environment. In fact, last year, this year, or the last 2 years and this coming year are three of the worst years in terms of increases in inflation that I've seen in 27 years of doing business. So that's obviously spurring a lot of conversation. And then employee benefits are used all the time. If you have a life or disability policy, you may never use it, right, during your working years. But you put a medical ID card in the hands of a company that has 100 employees and half are married and half have kids. You've got 225 people running around and there's a claim every hour, in a pharmacy or an urgent care or whatever. And so, our business is very service intensive. We get to know our business owners, I think, very closely. I have a very strong background in human resource leadership. I used to be a VP of HR at ADP for 3 or 4 years during my career there. And so what we find is that we end up really being trusted advisors to our clients, though, on anything related to people. So, helping them figure out succession planning, putting in executive benefits and benefits to their key employees, all leads to some pretty kind of close and important conversations with our business owners. And I really enjoy that, helping them put in infrastructure to attract and retain great talent, reward their top people and their executives, planning for the future in terms of estate tax liability or buy-sell agreement funding, and all those kinds of things tend to come up. And it's really cool to kind of hear all the stories. And I've heard literally thousands of them, different businesses and how they go, but it's fun.
Yeah, no, that's the thing when you become a trusted advisor, right? And you see, so curious, working and having worked with as many organizations as you do, you said working with the CEOs and the leadership, what kind of patterns do you see that repeat themselves in those businesses and things that maybe you had recognized in your business that you've overcome?
So I think one of the ones was the decision to have my sons join me in the business, from being a business that I was, I owned and had grown and built from the ground up. And, when I bought this thing, these guys were all in middle school and high school, and I don't think they ever envisioned really working for me, right, until about 5 or 6 years ago. But I've watched countless family-owned businesses, some of them doing incredibly well. Like, I've got some clients now that are fourth generation businesses that have been out for 100 years. They've managed to make it through that very difficult, third generation into the fourth generation. They have good governance, healthy cultures, all those things. And then I've seen other ones where, somebody has a kid graduate from Michigan State and the kid gets a VP title at 22 years old and sits in a corner office and has all this entitlement, and that just, kind of ruins it. And so I had to think long and hard about, like, when my first son Mark joined, just some of the counsel and advice I gave to him to make sure there was a positive culture and that my people were excited about it. Not, like, oh, wait, one of his kids is coming in and they're going to get everything and I'm not going to have opportunity. And that's absolutely the opposite of what I hope, all of our people feel, that having, Wilshire become a family-owned business, it's become kind of a force multiplier. It's become a strength. It's become an advantage. And it's become a path towards even more opportunity for all the other folks that work at our company that don't share my last name.
I grew up in family-owned business, and I think one of the things that's most important is that when your name is the name of the owner of the company, it's on the wall, right? I think everybody's looking at what you do and what you don't do. And so as you've brought your sons into the business, because the reality is it's nice to go work in the family business, but if you're doing it right, and I know you're doing it right, Dave, that there is an expectation of how you behave and how you show up. And that may be uncomfortable for some business owners and some of the kids that are coming into business. How do you set that expectation for them and brought the clarity to them of what the expectation is?
First thing is my name's not on the wall. We named it Wilshire because that was part of our financial group name from years and years ago. And I didn't want our business name to be a vanity plate for me, because it's not just about me. When they came in, I said, basically, look, I can't make anybody like you, trust you, or respect you. You have to earn all that on your own. If our last names weren't the same, people shouldn't automatically know we're related. I hope when you get into the business that you love it and that you're good at it and that both of those conditions are present, so that you're not, going along in life trying to please me or just do something you think you're supposed to do. You have to choose this career. When it became apparent that maybe all three would be in the business, if 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 4 or greater, we're going to do this. But the minute this starts to damage our family relationship and our love for one another, we're out. Like that, I'm not going to live my life. And I've seen that. One of my first experiences at the beginning of my career was going to work for a father-son combo, and everybody's loving each other. And 2 years later, I'm sitting in a courtroom at 1200 North Telegraph watching son testify against father in a lawsuit. Like, that is not going to happen under my watch. And, so that's kind of the household ground rules. And then I think in the business, I do believe that our team realizes that this is a positive thing for them. I wouldn't be bringing my kids into the business if my plan was to just, sell like everybody else has sold my industry over the last 5 years. And it really creates a long-term opportunity for everybody to grow and build something really special. So I never thought we'd be as big as we are this fast. And now I look at, where we can be in 2 or 3 years, and we can be, the largest benefit shop privately held in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
And inside of a 5-year window. I really think that's possible. And not that just to be large, but just because I think a lot of the industry has created, kind of a dissatisfying employee or service experience for customers that, we invest heavily in our service teams. We staff very well, got great employee retention, and our clients feel all that. And it's helping us win and grow.
Dave, do you mind if I ask you what might be a tough question?
Fire away.
All right. Thanks. We're all fathers first, right? We all have kids here. In your business with your 3 sons, how do you hold yourself accountable to hold them fairly accountable to the performance, so you're not creating that sense of entitlement? It sounds like you've done a nice job of it, but I'd be really curious for other family CEOs would love to hear some advice.
One of the best moves we made 5 years ago was, we talked before this call about, where companies hit ceilings and how they break through it.
Yeah.
We hit a ceiling at about $4 million, where we were in that range for a couple of years, and just, we'd have good sales, felt like we were doing things right, but we just didn't have the right leadership in place. And so I promoted 2 folks on our team, one to director of operations, one to vice president of basically sales and consulting. And by investing in that leadership, it really set us up on a path to grow faster, but it also put a buffer between me and my sons, so that they don't report to me. And the leadership team that we have now, and we just added another phenomenal leader last summer from a large national competitor, and she's been just a force to bring in all kinds of positive energy. And she knows that her role in large part is to be a mediator between the boys and I, and hold us both accountable to not, having 2 sets of standards or whatever. And I think that's working really well. I didn't want to, what we do is not necessarily rocket science in terms of the technical nature of our business, but it's complex, and there's a lot to learn. And it takes somebody, 8-10 years to become really, really good in our profession. And so during that time, my sons are all learning and doing normal jobs in the business. 2 are in sales, one's in more account management, operations and service and delivery. And I think so far they're holding themselves pretty accountable to knowing that they have a little bit of a higher standard to measure up to. So when we haven't really had it happen yet, but if somebody were to kind of slip out and start coasting a little bit, I think the other 2 would wrangle them in and pull them in line. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
yeah, that was good.
It's good. It's funny. The thing I was thinking about, and I've had this in businesses that I've been a part of, and family businesses and business that I coach, that those people, I love your design, how your sons don't report to you directly. There's somebody between you and them. I think that's smart, and kind of learn from the ground up. You could become a VP and get the corner office at 22 when you don't know anything, right? I think that's one of the worst things you can do. But I think going back to those people between yourself and your sons, I think one of the hard things is that how do you hire the right people and put them in those roles, and promote somebody, put them in a role where they have to be okay with holding your sons accountable, right? Being in the middle of that. It takes a lot of trust in you as a CEO that you got my back, and know that, I'm going to do the right things for your kid, for both them and the business, because I'm going to have to hold them accountable. I've talked about what works and what's not working. That's true for everybody, right? We all have stuff to work on. So how did you go about knowing that you had the right people that would have the courage, quite honestly, to mentor, coach, and lead your sons effectively in your family business?
I'm blessed that all 3 sons, I think, are pretty responsible kids. They're all high achievers. They have high goals for themselves, and they don't need a lot of management, right? They don't need a lot of supervision, so to speak. It's more mentorship.
Yeah.
But I think the key for me is that, Heidi and Lisa and Kim are the 3 ladies that I'm referring to, who are all vice presidents in the company. They know that I've got their back and trust them. to lead and deliver and have difficult conversation or do course corrections without any blowback. You know what I mean? And I also describe that, but there's got to be a level of trust at the senior leadership level. We meet regularly and they know kind of directionally, where my head's at. We also have everybody aligned from a compensation standpoint where it's cooperate and graduate. So if we all work together, we're all going to do well.
Yeah.
I don't have a system set up where people are competing against each other or that there's some zero-sum game involved. Like the better one person does, we're all going to do better.
I'd love to go back, Dave, because one of the questions we had talked about beforehand is what kind of people-related issues do you see that tend to surface before a company hits a growth ceiling? And one of the things you said, talked about your company, and you said one of the things you did to break through that was to invest in leadership. Can you break that down a little more?
Yeah. So, up until for the first 5 years after I bought the business, I was the one person shoveling coal in the engine to keep the engine going, right? So I was on the front end of all new business development. I had a director of operations. I went through 2 different director of operations, both very nice people, but neither one really had the organizational skills or the kind of the strength to hold people accountable. And we were growing like kind of a teenage kid, clumsy, made some mistakes a little bit. I think through it all, I think we maintained a pretty good reputation in the industry. We had good client retention.
Okay.
We managed to make it work, but we just didn't have the kind of the well-oiled machine that I think we have today. What came out of almost catastrophe with having to make a leadership change was taking 2 people who were ready for a step up, had the capacity to lead at a higher level, but I had them in more production roles and I had to pay to get them out of the production roles. This doesn't always work, right? You can't always take like your best salesperson or your best account leader and make them a manager. But in my case, I was fortunate that both of these 2 ladies had leadership skills and the capacity to kind of manage and lead at a higher level, but I had to get them out of doing things to leading things. And at that same time, we made some investments in our systems and technology for like a CRM system, for example, and operationalized everything in our business, created operational standards that gave everybody kind of a blueprint to follow. So people knew their jobs. We organized workflows, routine and regular communication on where clients were in the renewal process, for example. And what we found is that work just got less stressful. New people could come in and they knew what was expected of them and what standards were in terms of doing their job. And the result of that was it was a big investment in me. I had to pull money out of my pocket to pay these people to lead versus do, and then also pay somebody else to do what they were doing. But since that happened, my life just got a lot better.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just about me. I can walk away from the business for a week or 2 now and things happen. And, bills get paid and people are taken care of and customers happen. And now, even with me being gone, sales happen and new business development happens. So I'm not irrelevant yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
I think that's the thing. I've seen it all the time. Business owners that they're so, they make themselves the center of everything.
Yeah.
And it's just, that is such a limiting thing. And it takes risk to empower others and delegate, not just for, responsibility, but authority to make decisions and act. And you have to train your people to make decisions and act. Like, for the first couple of years, they're like coming back to me with all these questions. Like, wait a minute, wait. You said you wanted, you make that decision. You want to hire that person, you hire that person.
Yeah.
And you can own it.
Yeah.
So this is a fascinating topic. I like to unpack it a little bit because there's a lot in there, Dave. You just told this is a little part of the business review thing you just talked about in about 4 minutes. So you actually realized at some point that the barrier to growth was there's only so much you could do. You're feeding the fire, the one shovel in the coal. I got to build leadership capability to get us past $4 million. You try to hire a couple people internally, they're not the right people. And then you come to the thought that I'm going to have to go invest and take money out of my own pocket to have people that are now working in a job, being producers, I would imagine in some form, and take them out of that and make them people leaders so that we could build the organization. So talk to us about kind of how long that took, and then what was the return on investment for you after that period of time, right? And you talked about you got some, you got off the treadmill a bit, which is the work that Glenn and I are so passionate about helping CEOs do is get off that treadmill. It shouldn't all be about them. So you're doing exactly the things that we're interested in talking about. So how long did it take for you to get these people to the point where they could execute consistently, and then you start to get that ROI back of you basically sacrificing to help the organization move ahead? It's great thinking.
Yeah. So in our industry, it is very common for leaders, not unlike if you look at a law firm or a CPA firm or an insurance agency, even the leaders and the CEOs are producers.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're out practicing law. I don't know how you can be the CEO of a 600 employee law firm and still practice,
I know.
like, and be an effective leader.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I learned this lesson through my time at ADP and Humana, mainly ADP, I don't want my managers trying to also be a personal producer. Like, I know they can do the job, but like, to me, it's inherent conflict. Someone's going to get shortchanged there. The client's going to get shortchanged, or your people are going to get shortchanged. And I want leaders available to develop and support and work with my team, my consultants and my producers. Right. So that was a first decision, a conscious decision, to not have working managers who are doing a personal book of business and then also trying to manage, growth and chaos. And that has paid huge dividends. It was, financially a setback, but, I'll tell you, like, we're back to back 20% growth years, and we're going to do it again. And we're doing it with a pretty positive environment with great employee retention. We had our best client retention year in 2025 ever, in terms of even like gross dollar amounts, very minimal loss. And half of that was just M&A activity where it wasn't really within their control. I pray every day that that's going to continue, but I know, cycles are coming. But for me, like right now, what I'm trying to do more than anything is I've got great people on my team. I've got some wonderful young folks that started with us, been promoted several times. They're emerging as leaders. So like I invest in sending people to Leadership Oakland or Leadership Macomb. We pay for people to go through Dale Carnegie or professional development training classes. I want all of my staff members to get professional designations and certifications and letters behind their name to make them smarter in what they do. We reward and pay for all of that. It's just, to me, one of the biggest kicks I get out of being a CEO is watching the folks on our team grow and develop and mature.
Sure.
And some people have an appetite for it, and they're not overly ambitious about it in a negative way, but they have, goals for themselves, and it's fun to create an environment where they can lead and grow and improve themselves. We have other people that just really enjoy the role they're in our company, and it's stable and it works for them, and they're, wherever they're at in life today with work-life family balance. But I think back to your original question, there's no easy way around it. If you're going to scale and grow as a company and you don't have the leadership team to support that growth, you're not going to make it. And that's front of mind for me completely.
We're talking about that all the time. Like, if you don't have the right people, you're just not going anywhere. So just to unpack this a little bit more. So you make the investment, right? Your earnings in your pocket goes down for how long before you start to see this growth that you're at 20% annual growth? Like, what was that time frame? Is it a year, 2 years, 18 months? What would that look like for you?
I think we put our current leadership team in place about 5 years ago, and it paid for itself in less than a year.
Okay.
Really, in terms of new sales and revenue coming in to offset the additional costs of that additional salary cap. So we just did it again. We just invested in a senior leader for our team who's overseeing now all of our consulting organizations and all of our consultants and account managers, all the client-facing folks. It's tempting to say, hey, why don't you handle, these 10 clients too? But, to ask her to do that would be to take away from her time to pour into everybody else on the team. And I think people, appreciate that. And so I'm, as a privately held business, I'm going to have to ask the board of directors or a private equity group if I can spend that money to do it. It's nice to be able to just make that decision and go. And
But Dave, what strategically, let me just ask this one, Glenn. Sorry.
Yeah,
but
go ahead.
strategically, you're playing a longer term game than a short term game. That's really what it sounds like you're doing to me. When you think about these
100%.
moves,
Yeah.
right? You're thinking 3 to 5 years down the road. You're not thinking 3 to 9 months down the road. You're saying, hey, we're going to take a little haircut for a little bit, but these are the right things to help create a sustainable organization that will grow the right growth, quality growth year after year.
Correct. Someone else someday is going to own Wilshire besides me. I know at least some of those people will be my sons. through whether a combination of them buying me out eventually or gifting or both. So I am working on trying to develop their leadership skills and ownership skills. We go to several conferences a year with other agency owners to help them understand the bigger picture and kind of the dynamics of running our organization. But I am, kind of settled in to do this for the long haul with them. And I want to get to the point where I can take Fridays off or take some longer vacations and walk away from the business a little bit more. But I love what I do too. And that's part of it. I mean, to me, this is not really work. It is fun. It's almost, I don't say sport, but it's challenging yourself to get up and like right now we're in a really good spot in our industry. We're a really good spot in the market and it's fun. So as long as it's still fun, we're going to keep doing it. I'm not running it like I'm getting ready to sell it. That's all happened with a lot of my competitors, and God bless them. I talked to one or two of my competitors who had to sell. They didn't have a succession plan. That's the number one reason why I think a lot of my competitors do sell out to a larger group or private equity. If you think it through, it doesn't really always solve your succession plan though, right? Like even if you're planning on selling your business, you still have to have a good leadership team.
Right.
Yeah. To lead it going forward. You can't just rely on somebody else to plop some manager that's going to fly in from Des Moines, Iowa and know how to run your team in Detroit. Right. So bringing me back to my, initial priority, and that's developing leaders and managers within the organization.
Dave, for other CEOs who might be listening, what are those signs for them they should be investing in leadership? Because I would agree with you. I think that's the number one barrier to growth for SMBs.
It's not easy, but I think first of all, you have to create an environment that's going to attract leaders. Like I would never have been able to attract some of our most recent hires if they didn't see in our organization a better place for them to be than the larger, more established, successful place they were at. So there's got to always be opportunity. If you want to, in our industry, and again, you can look at law firms and CPA firms and insurance agencies very similarly, people tend to build a lifestyle business. And I'm going to grow my business to this point. I'm going to make X amount of money. And then I just want to keep things kind of steady. I don't want to grow. And I think the minute you have that mindset, you're dead.
Yeah.
Because it is grow or die. And the reason I say that is there are plenty of people that they get themselves in this point where they're strained and stressed and okay, I can't attract a leader. Well, you got to build something that's going to draw talent.
Right.
And then you got to be able to let go and delegate and empower. And that's hard too.
Yeah.
And I know that, people are going to make mistakes. It's going to cost me money or to lose a client. Yep. And that's just called tuition, right? That's where wisdom comes from.
That's called tuition. I love that.
So, but if you're not willing to take that chance and empower people, it's all going to continue to fall back to me, which is going to be limiting in terms of growth, which will be limiting in terms of potential for our employees, which is going to cause me to lose my best employees. Because my best people, they're confident. They're going to be successful no matter where they're at.
Right.
I just want them to feel like they can be as successful as they need and want to be here.
Right. Yep. That's the CEO who holds them back, who limits their potential, right? If they're truly great performers, they're going to leave. And that goes right back to, that's one of the hallmarks of the doom loop that we see.
Yeah. I've seen that so many times in my career, both where I work and with my clients where, well, I just want to, if I could just get these 3 people going and this thing's running on cruise control and then I'm set. Well, you might be, but the people on your team who have aspirations are not.
Right.
So if you're trying to hold them down just to support your little fiefdom or kingdom, you're going to lose your best people.
Yep.
And then, where are you? You're back to square one and you're frustrated again. You're sucked back into the business or whatever. So that to me, that's why growth is not an option. Yeah. It's funny to talk. I heard this phrase though, revenue is vanity, profits are sanity, cash is king. Right.
Yeah.
So that rings in my head a lot too.
Yeah.
Right. Revenue is vanity. So we grew 22.5% last year. We're poised to grow 20% again this year. It's fun. It's exciting to see that.
Yeah.
But it's not the goal, just the goal by itself. It's a good measure to show that you got a healthy organization that's doing the right things.
I think when you get the right team in place and you create a great culture, you just win, right? I mean, again, I think it's about, building that, and then the results just start to happen. And we're about results and goals. That's a big part of what we coach to. But I think going back to what Glenn started earlier, is that if you don't have the right team, the right leadership team, and they're not cohesive, you don't have the right culture, you're just not going to get there. And if you don't have a talent and you don't grow, quality growth, not grow to grow, your A
Yeah.
talent's going to leave you and go to somebody else that's doing a better job of it. And you're right. If you can't create an organization that attracts A talent from other places and they can come see, golly, what an impact I can make on the business and how I can provide for my family and myself and work with great people, it's so powerful. And it's just such opportunity to do it. I mean, it's just things you're talking about, Dave. It's just crazy, but you see it just like we do. It's not everywhere. And that is the opportunity.
Yeah.
If you just get good at this stuff, you can move mountains, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we spend a lot of time on our team and culture, team building activities, those kinds of things. I've had one or two employees question, like, well, why are we so focused on growth? And, is that a big deal? And all those kinds of things. I'm like, well, all of you want more, right? Everybody, health insurance is more expensive. People want to make more money. People want additional opportunity for them and their families. So the more we grow the ocean, the more shoreline we create, the more ports of call we create, the more opportunities there are. And so that's kind of where we're at in terms of a mindset and culture for the company.
Dave, what do you think that someone who's successfully grown and is growing an organization, but also someone who works, I'm assuming, with a lot of growth organizations and growth-minded CEOs in your business, what do you see as the mind shift that CEOs need to make to go from that smaller founder-led organization to really scale up to a true company?
I can't speak for certain industries that are maybe based more on volume or scale because I don't have equipment and materials and supplies. I've had people tell me, well, you should take out more debt and invest in your business. And I really don't like debt. I spent most of my life getting out of debt. I'm kind of out of debt and I want to stay that way. But it's back to the motivation for growth too. Like my motivation for growth is just to be dominant and excellent in what we do in our core market, right? I've thought about trying to expand into multiple cities. Like I have kind of a footprint to do that through the Northwestern Mutual system if I wanted to. I've got colleagues in every city in the US. But for me, I feel like that would stretch my energy too thin and I'd go wide and get distracted rather than go deep and be great. So we want to be dominant and excellent in the state of Michigan for Michigan headquartered businesses. We've got clients with locations and people all over the country. We've got businesses outside in Michigan that are self-funded that we can take care of and support. For me, I don't want to grow just for the sake of growing. I want quality growth. We've learned to say no to certain clients that 5 years ago I'd have been like, "Are you crazy? We'll take it." And now if we run into a business that doesn't fit our model and it's going to be more of a distraction, or if it's a leadership team or an owner that really doesn't care about employees or doesn't want to do things really the right way, I'd rather just let somebody else deal with that. I don't know that I have the best advice for people that want to, rapidly scale and use private equity and grow. I've watched some clients of ours do it masterfully. I have one in particular, we picked them up as a client almost 10 years ago at 50 employees, and now they're at 750 employees. They've done several acquisitions and they've grown very well and expanded their markets. But I think they're in more of a service and delivery business in an industry that's ripe for aggregation. So they've done, they've brought in private equity, they've got all the right advisors, and that's their model to go nationwide and expand. And they've done an exceptional job at it. It's been fun to watch. I haven't had that vision for my business, but I, maybe I need to open my eyes and maybe it's easier to do than I'd think. I do realize though, in my particular industry, the M&A activity has been so heavy. I'm not going to try to compete at those multiples to buy and expand through acquisition. I really don't have any desire to do another acquisition unless it was really a super right fit, which I don't really see happening. I'd rather just grow organically. It's a lot easier to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Than trying to do M&A stuff.
Yeah. Good perspective.
Well, are we ready to wrap? We're at 3:42. I'll be respectful of Dave's time since we started a little bit late. So our last question here, which is, Dave, if you give one piece of advice to yourself as an earlier stage CEO, what would it be?
I would say probably try to identify senior leadership earlier and faster in the organization. It's hard to do because we were small and really didn't have the budget for it. But having an identified number two earlier on would have been helpful. The other thing that I would say is that when I took over the business in 2010, we were losing money. It was struggling. But one of the first piece of advice I got from a very successful colleague and counterpart was that it was all about culture. And he introduced me to, this culture company that he used. And the price tag was like 15 grand for the initial consulting engagement back then. It's probably more than that now. And I'm like, there's just no way I can afford that. And I waited 6 years to do that. And I wish I would have done that sooner, just to invest in a set of behaviors and norms and in a definition of who and what we want to be about as people and as colleagues and business professionals, and articulated that and started preaching that message sooner. I feel like that would have made a bigger impact sooner than it has. Because if I look to the one thing, if you said, okay, what's the one thing that's helped us get to where we are? It is our culture. It's how we developed and how we operate. Right. And that, and I know that sounds cheap because I was a skeptic back then. Like, culture, what do you mean? Oh, come on, let's just go sell stuff and take care of it, and it'll all happen to take care of itself. But you have to define for people what your company's gonna be, and how you're gonna be viewed in the marketplace, and how we treat people, and how we communicate, and how we act.
Yeah.
It's all the behaviors.
Yeah. Dave, I love how you said that. And it's so true. It's the behaviors. It's not platitudes on the wall.
No. And it's
Conversations.
It's not awards and ego things. It is how we behave and treat each other. And really our tenets define how we treat each other, how we treat our customers, how we treat their employees, and how we treat our vendors and carriers and suppliers.
Yeah.
And so it's all with respect. At the end of the day, trust. And so our carriers have to trust that we're, fighting for the right things. And there's always exceptions that have to be made. There's always judgment calls. And at the end of the day, our major carriers have to trust that we're doing the right thing and that they're going to grant us an exception or fix a problem that they maybe don't have to fix because they've got a track record and a history with us. And we do things the right way. And that's how, we want to be viewed in the market.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm taking two things away, Dave, is invest in leadership, invest in culture.
That's a pretty good summary.
Great.
It took me a while to get there, but yeah, I would go with that.
All right.
If it was only so easy, right? It sounds so easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work.
It
is.
No,
it's
simple,
but it's
mistakes,
not easy. Yeah.
No, right.
No, I've been blessed big time. I love my team. I love our environment work every day. It's awesome.
I appreciate you sharing the journey with us, Dave. It's a real pleasure meeting you.
Cool. Yeah, it was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Glenn, you want to do the wrap up today?
Yeah. So Dave, thanks so much for being with us today and talking about your time in the CEO doom loop and how you've overcome that. And you sound like you've built a great company and shared some lessons along the way. So John and I are leadership and strategic coaches for CEOs and leadership teams using the Metronomics framework. And we love hosting this podcast, Escape the CEO Doom Loop. So Dave, you've been a great guest and we look forward to seeing how your episode does. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.